At this time, I'd like to turn today's program over to Julie Lochner. Ms. Lochner, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar where we're going to talk about cloud test data management. In particular, as mentioned as the title of the webinar, how to create secure Oracle test data sets with the Informatica Cloud Platform. My name is Julie Lochner. I'm Vice President of the Information Lifecycle Management and Test Data Management Product Group within Informatica. And today joining me is Jay Hill, Director of Product Management for Test Data Management. Hello, Jay. How are you today?
Doing well. Can't wait to get started here.
Great. So let's go to today's agenda. We have a lot to cover in a short amount of time. One of the first things that we're going to talk about is a little bit about the test data challenges as it relates to creating Oracle test data sets. And then we'll talk about what we are releasing, what we have available today in Informatica Cloud called Cloud Test Data Management. Specifically, we'll talk about Oracle initially, but it also applies to applications such as Salesforce.com or other cloud applications. Then Jay's going to take us through a demonstration on how to create test data subsets, masking and subsetting as a service. I'll come back on the line. We'll talk a little bit about packaging and availability. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll open it up for questions. Sound good, Jay?
Good.
Sounds good. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, how do developers create Oracle test data sets today? Now, what we found working in the test data management market is that most of the time, people will use either full copies of Oracle production instances, or they'll create a copy of the Oracle database sans data. So it's basically an empty Oracle environment with the schema and all the metadata, but there's no data in it. The problem with this, either approach, is that when you're using a copy of the database without the data, you're potentially introducing risk of not having the right test data for your test cases. And the problem with using full copies of Oracle data is, A, it could potentially introduce risk of exposing sensitive data to your testers and trainers, but also it takes a lot of time in some cases when these databases are fairly large. And if they are fairly large, there's always a cost associated with those non-production environments, including storage, server, et cetera. So if we look at the first question on the poll, is, so operator, if you wouldn't mind, we have an interactive dialogue today. So if you are sipping your coffee or listening on the side, take a look at the poll that we're about to push out. And the question is, how many full copies of Oracle databases do you have as non-production environments? So while that poll is being positioned out for you guys, go ahead and select one. Jay, we've been working in this market for some time. How many copies do you see a lot of our customers creating for non-prod? What's the average, do you think?
Okay, it really does depend, but on average, we see a lot of organizations from in the neighborhood of 8 to 12 copies of production, and this is for then your development, testing, training, pre-production, model office, all sorts of needs, that are used for these full production copies.
Yeah, and I think, if we talked about the challenges before, when you use a full copy, the issue is a lot of the compliance officers and data privacy managers are starting to look at those non-production copies as a potential risk, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's sort of this hidden risk is that as developers, testers, trainers that do have access to the non-production environments, like us, maybe they're savvy professionals or the folks that are on the call here, is that you'll have access to all sorts of data in order to do your job, whether it's your quality assurance or development. And there's definitely a chance of exposure there because you do not have your production access level controls in your non-production environments. And you're right. Security officers are starting to take a look at that and say, well, how can we prevent kind of this hidden risk in our non-production environments?
So, operator, why don't you close the poll and let's take a look at what our listeners have responded to in terms of how many full copy Oracle databases are used in non-production environments.
Perfect, and those answers are compiling here for you. You should see that in just a second.
Great, thank you. And Jay, so the risk is one thing, but the other problem is the cost. I know that when we were managing, in a previous company, we were managing anywhere from 50 to 70 test environment copies, but for every 2 production databases. So we were basically working on a 25 to 1, and the budget was just blown out because every time production would grow, so would all of those non-production copies, right?
Yeah, exactly. When you start talking about the total cost of data and trying to drive that down, is that if you do make these full-size copies, then especially if you're in the terabyte range, then you have these many terabytes of data that are sitting around that are really extraneous to a developer or tester. When all the typical developer or QA analyst would need is really a good amount of data. Not, let's say, 10 years worth of history and not terabytes of data, but just something good enough to be able to do their job well.
And get them started, exactly.
Yeah. And I do see the poll answers in here, Julie. Interesting. I think it's kind of a mix here. I think the biggest poll was actually, response was in the 3 to 5 range. And that does make sense. That's sort of the 29% of the respondents came into there too. That's like for a given production environment. There's at a minimum there'll be your dev and QA before you get into production, and there's likely maybe a training environment as well. So that kind of fits in there. And then quite a few respondents also were in the 5 to 10 range as well.
No kidding. Yeah. So it sounds like we're really targeting the right group here. So if we go on to the next chart where we talk about those common test data challenges, I mean, there's a build here, right? I mean, there's production defects, manually sanitizing data. I mean, we kind of touched on those, but one of the things I just wanted to bring up was, what do people do today, right? What are they doing? Well, they're probably creating manual scripts to copy data from source to target. Those manual scripts sometimes can take time to create. They can, maybe they're not reusable from person to person. There's not a knowledge transfer that goes from one tester to the next. We were just at Star West last week, the global testing conference, and a lot of the folks there were saying, we're having an issue where, we want to get recent data from production, but we only have so many times that we can refresh our test data because it impacts production. Or if they have a recent copy, they have a process where they just refresh all of the test data, and then it clobbers what the testers were doing. I mean, so there's a lot of challenges that our customers are facing when it comes to test data. But if you look at the build on the cost, at the end of the day, how do you justify building a solution or leveraging a technology unless there's a business benefit? So, for example, we talked about full copies can consume servers, storage, license, and time. There's days of lost productivity creating those manually writing those scripts or doing manual extracts to create the test data sets. And then, as Jay pointed out, I mean, you need to mask all the records. In fact, test data management, as it's defined today, it by default, it includes data masking, not just creating the test data sets, but ensuring that you're building data privacy rules into that process. So with the solution, if we go to the next slide, Informatica Cloud Test Data Management was really designed to address those challenges that we talked about, right, Jay? Data masking and data subsetting, combining those two. And the idea here is that you want to reduce the cost and risk by creating test data subsets that are specifically purpose-built for that test case. It meets the needs of the test case. And when we do it, we mask the sensitive data so that when we get to the target environment, nothing is exposed. So the first step in this process, and you'll see there's a Powered by Vibe logo that came from the Cloud Test Data Management platform. That software is a secure agent that when you subscribe to the Informatica Cloud software as a service, the first thing that you do is you download an agent that sits behind the firewall on your premises. It's a lightweight engine, and what QA admin or outsourcer people do is they'll connect to the Cloud Test Data Management platform via the cloud, so they don't have to have anything installed or running on premises, and they configure any source or target environments that they want to get data from and put data to, including the masking rule. So Jay's going to show this in the demo. And then when they push the run execution button, that metadata gets downloaded to the local agent behind the firewall, so nothing is stored in the cloud. And at execution time, the Powered by Vibe Informatica Cloud Secure Agent will select the subset data from a source environment, apply the filters, and then insert that secure data into your non-production environments, and it all happens behind the firewall. So what's really nice about this is you have multiple users who are accessing and querying these environments, but when it comes to test and dev, your testers, your contractors, your trainers, they're only accessing information that's been already sanitized. Now, if you think about this as a service, Informatica Cloud Test Data Management also supports Salesforce. So I know that this webinar is really focusing on Oracle, but it really applies to multiple platforms. But in the case with Salesforce, it's a little bit different, right? Your production environment is in the cloud, as are your sandboxes. So we go through the same scenario. You have users accessing production. You have testers, contractors, and trainers accessing the sandboxes with the same secure agent from the Powered by Vi perspective. Those QA admin or the people who are defining the test data sets or outsourcers would connect to the cloud test data management software as a service, configure the policy in the cloud, and then when they hit execute, the software, the agent, pulls data from the production environment. It subsets and masks the data based on those rules, and then inserts in just the data that is required for the test data set, and it's masked in the process so that when it lands in those empty developer environments or sandboxes, there's a small test data subset that's purpose-built for that need, and it's secure. So again, you're never exposing your pipeline information or sales information to people that don't work for the company or to the unauthorized users. So I'm going to open it up to the second poll. And so, operator, if you wouldn't mind posting the second poll, it says, what testing and data security approaches have you tried? Now, in this poll, we're asking that you select all that apply. Now, Jay, if you look at some of these poll answers, these are the types of solutions that we're replacing these approaches for our customers, correct?
Yeah, exactly. It's and a lot of them that are here too. Are more kind of manual processes, without use of enterprise grade software, and that's the thing. It's just there's means and mechanisms perhaps to do similar things, but like the scripting and things like that, it's going to take extra bandwidth away from developers from doing the job they're supposed to be doing, which would be developing new applications to help take on new business challenges.
Well, you as a product manager, you see this, right? Any time that the developer's time is precious, and any time that they're spent redoing something that they could have automated through, something that's productized, there's clearly an advantage to having something that eliminates that manual scripting, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And just so that the labor, exactly, just taking away from their prime objectives, doing new development or testing the software. But if you're taking lots of their time to actually create good data, or even the dummy data as well. It's back in the day when I was a developer too. You needed data. You had to have some data, and if you had to create it yourself, put some dummy data in there, it was okay. But then, like you mentioned on one of the first slides too, then it's not very powerful, and that you risk the chance then of moving something into production that hasn't been tested very well
with the right data. So, operator, if you wouldn't mind, we'll close the poll and tabulate the results. And while that's doing that, you kind of bring up a good point, Jay. You need to be able to have the right test data, and you want to make sure that the test data aligns with the test case. But, when one of a previous webinar that we did, we asked how long does it take or how much time consumes the QA or the tester or the developer's time related to test data management tests. And what was surprising to me was the majority of the respondents said 30% or more of their time is spent just creating or managing test data sets. And I say managing and creating because it also included having to reset the test data or having to refresh the environment. There was anything that had to do with kind of synchronizing your test data with either a production environment or the new data model if they were deploying a new data model, right? So 30% seems like a lot, especially if you could take that time and replace it with identifying bugs and improving the application quality, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the poll did come in here, and no real surprises. And I think it kind of validates some of the things we were talking about here. Is that The number one, so the copy production data to test, 68% of the respondents came in with that one.
Wow.
The next one, creating dummy data, was 48% of the respondents.
Yeah.
And then manual scripting around 45% as well. So those are, the exact area that we see out there in other webinars and other conversations that we have.
Yeah. No, I mean, so, and again, the easiest thing to do is to copy production data. The challenge is that, we talk about it exposes risk, but what are your alternatives, right? So we talked about Informatica test data management or cloud test data management. What I'd like to do is, so we look internally, right? We have our own development team, we have our own IT organization, and we went to our CIO and VP of IT and the person who manages the application development process, and we worked on a business case internally first to say, where's the savings? And what was interesting is with the cloud test data management software, we developed. I mean, again, our environment is fairly small. We're almost $1 billion company, and we have large staff, but the team really does a lot of stuff in the cloud. In fact, everything in our IT organization is cloud first. So we put together a business case, and we had 5 developers working. In this business case here is around one application. They had 70 test and development environments that were created per year. So it's not that there were 70 environments. It's just they would refresh or recreate a test environment up to 70 times. So if there were 4 releases, it might be 10 to 15 test environments per quarter. And they were creating full copies that was costing them about $100,000 annually, which is not trivial if you consider our budget and where we spend the money. I mean, because everything is hosted, when we do spend the money on that full copy cost, it sticks out, right? So when we went through taking the cloud testing management software and where the savings would be, what was interesting is, reducing development costs. So how much time was spent on that? Remember that 30% of time spent managing test data? They estimated just the raw time associated with that would save them about $70,000 per year, which is honorable mention. Reduce defect rework. Again, how much time are they wasting by fixing bugs because they didn't have the right test data set? Again, $33K. So you tie those two together, just the time savings is about $100K a year. But the one that was interesting to me is because we're a publicly traded company, they were worried about the fact that we do have data that sits in the cloud that could potentially be exposed to unauthorized users. And, the research shows that most breaches, or what they call data leakage, happens by people who have authorized access but really are unauthorized users, right? Or maybe even people who had the right intentions but made a mistake. And analysts say that the cost of a data breach when you're a publicly traded company or in a regulated industry can cost anywhere from $50 to $90 per record, because you have to do the notification, you have to do the audit, you have to do the remediation, and then you have to audit again, and then you have to publicize that you fix the problem. So again, if you tie all that together, it's quite significant. I mean, so the benefit here was about $250,000 over 3 years. Again, if you tied that to every application environment that we have, I mean, it could become quite astonishing. So, Jay, I mean, I know that you worked with IT and everything like that. What I think makes sense at this point is, why don't you? I mean, it's great to talk about the benefit. It's great to talk about the technology. I think it makes sense to show it. So, Jay, why don't you take us through the demonstration and take it from here?
Very good. Thanks, Julie. Okay, so what we'll take a look at today is cloud test data management and a demonstration on how to reduce the cost and risk of Oracle test environments. Again, this is Jay Hill, Director of Product Management within the Informatica ILM business unit, and responsible for the test data management products, which include the data masking and data subsets. Okay, with that, give me 1 second. I will share my desktop. Okay, so what we'll do first here is I will log on to the Informatica Cloud. So as Julie had mentioned before, so this is, it's hosted in the cloud like other software as a service. So I'll log in. And it takes me to different applications. There's a home screen and other applications that are hosted on the Informatica cloud. So there's data synchronization, data validation, and what we'll take a look at now is the test data management application called data masking. And what I have here is two tasks that are already set up. One is specifically towards Salesforce. I'll take a small look at that later, but also for on-premise Oracle. So what we'll do here is this task is set up to extract data out of a production Oracle database to populate a non-production, let's say it's a QA environment. So before we do that, let me just set the stage, and I'll bring up the Oracle SQL Developer. And as you can see here, I have a couple of different connections. I have what's called this ILM source, and within here there's just a small number of tables, and this represents what we call an airline loyalty program. So you could think of this, let's say, as United Mileage Plus or something like that. And we have in here then customers, and for customers we have their ID, what type of membership are they, what level, and then lots of sensitive information like their last name, first name, credit card number, looks like the Social Security number, their date of birth, etc. So lots of sensitive data and related information as well. So let's say a customer, they also have an address. And once again, we see and hear some personally identifiable information, such as the person's address, their zip code, phone number, and other information. So all this is required, of course, in the production environment with the different data and the relationships and all the sensitive data. But I also now have a non-production environment, which the goal now for here is that I don't have any data. So I'm able to copy the schema over, just using standard tools, but now I'm missing the data. So you're in a bit of a conundrum, and back to the poll question is that, well, what do you do here? Do you manually enter in data? Do you write some scripts to populate it? Or do you do a full production copy? All of those have different prices and costs and concerns. But what we're about to do then is to be able to show the Informatica Cloud how we can simply and easily move over a subset of the production data into this non-production environment, and then also mask the sensitive data before it lands. And that's one of the big challenges then too, is you don't want to have that sensitive data in this non-production environment. Okay, now that we've set the stage, then I'll go back to Informatica Cloud, and I'll take a look at this subset and mask on-premise task. I just click on it and edit. And just for the sake of the demonstration, I already have this all set up. But as you see here, it's a nice kind of chevron sign type movement. It's a step-by-step wizard process where first you put in the definition, then where you connect to on the source, the target, your filter criteria for the subsetting, how you want to mask, and then go ahead and schedule. So for the first step, I'll put in a name and a description. And then moving over to the source. So the source then is where I connect to, and this would be then my Oracle local source. And in this case, it actually happens to be on a VM image sitting on my laptop. And this here, I can go ahead and view it and make sure this is the right one. This is the case. This is the loyalty database, the airline loyalty database, and connecting to the VM image that's sitting on my local system. And once you do that, then you have an option as far as the type of data you want to move over. In this case, I'm acting, let's say, as the role of a test data specialist, and a developer has asked me, could you please populate my non-production environment with some sample customer and ticket data. So what you can do here is simply, like I know the schema, so I'm able to say, okay, well, customers are related to addresses, and I know then that tickets are also related to ticket attachments, and tickets are related to customers. If you wanted to build out additional objects and create relationships, you simply just click on there and click create relationships. For now, I'm just going to leave it as is, since it's already nicely set up for us. So the goal here is to bring over a set of customers with their addresses, corresponding airline ticket numbers, and the associated attachments. Because what you can't do, you can't just move over, let's say, from an application, just, let's say, a header record, just like, let's say, a sales order without the sales order items. Maybe the database doesn't have physical constraints in place, but at least the calling application is now going to choke on that and will not function properly. So as you're moving data over, you need to make sure that you're moving over related information as well, and you can easily do that through the user interface here. Now that I've set up the basic table relationships, I'll then move on to the target. You have an option here too, is that you can say the same as source, and this would be the case then if you do full production copies, and you now have exposed sensitive data, let's say in maybe a production support environment, then you could go ahead and just say same as source, and what we'll do is just you won't be subsetting, but you'll be masking in place. But in this use case, like I showed, I have an empty non-production environment, so I want to go ahead and populate it. I have some options then on how I want to update the target. I can just assume it's empty. In this case, I know that it is, or do updates, or do an upsert, which would then be insert first, and if those fail, then do updates. And I can also say whether I want to truncate the target system or not. So in this case, I'll leave it as true even though I know there's no data in there. So then we'll move on to the subset side of things. And you have some options here, and the whole idea, too, as a cloud-based application, is to leave this nice and simple and straightforward where you can really, you don't even need to read any documentation on this. You just get access, and you can start clicking through the different steps, and off you go. So on here for the filters, I have some options. I can either say process all the rows related to these filters, or I can put in things like maybe I want to process the first 10 rows that match the filter, or maybe only the first 5% of the rows. In this case, for the demonstration, I'll leave it kind of nice and simple. I'll process all the rows for customers where the last name is equal to tally. So for customers, I can do any sort of filter criteria on a specific column that I want. In addition, you could go ahead and do some more fancy things and create last name equal to tally, and maybe the date of birth, greater than some date, so you can make this as complex as you want to. And of course, then there is, online help directly here, so that you can get some additional information how to construct, the different logic. But again, for now, I'll just leave this nice and simple. And let's take a look then, before we actually run this, for tally. I just want to look at the production environment here, so that we do have, lots of data for the customer, and it is for tally, and that would be then here for the last name. That person does exist. They've got a credit card, ID number, and then there's going to be an associated address with them, as well as some ticket information as well. So I know that's a good example customer that I want to move over to this non-production environment that the developer requested of me. Okay, so back over to Informatica Cloud. And then we see here, so I'll go ahead and I put in my filter criteria. And now it's about the sensitive data. So now that I'm moving production data into non-production, perhaps this is an outsourced development or testing practice that I'm working with. Or maybe it's some offshore folks or other types of contractors. And as Julie had mentioned, the security officers, these days, they put in, firewalls and all sorts of, two-factor authentication, to get into the network and all of this. So they're not as concerned, let's say, about outside hackers getting in, but they're more concerned right now is about insiders, and it's either out of negligence or maybe just not knowing policy, or actually malicious insiders that are doing unscrupulous things with the data that they shouldn't be doing. So here, we're concerned about the masking side of things, to make sure that we do then mask sensitive data before it moves into these exposed development or QA environments. So what I can do is go object by object and look at the sensitive data like credit card, and then put a corresponding masking rule. And we have out of the box a set of standard masking algorithms or rules like a credit card. And what we'll do is actually, it's not just going to randomly generate numbers, but we'll make sure that it has the appropriate checksum on the end. So if it's a Visa, it's the appropriate algorithm, and it'll pass application checks. Same thing with other credit card issuers. And what you can do on some of the rules is to do certain things like there's some different parameters, like in this case, keep the issuer. So in case the initial data was Visa or Amex, you'll keep the issuer as is. Or what you can do is say, oh, actually, I don't want to do that. I just want to make all of the data Visa. But in this case, I'll just go ahead and keep the issuer. And for others, let's say like date of birth, we can put in different things. You can either nullify the date of birth, but maybe the application wouldn't like that. So you also could do random on the date. And for this one, we do have some configuration options as well. So what we can do here is, put in a range, let's say. And this is always a sensitive area as far as date of birth. So maybe we'll, put everybody, somewhere in 1970 to 1990 birth, and make us all, a little bit younger. I'll go ahead and cancel that one. In addition, there's other areas, like email, that are quite sensitive. You don't want to be sending out email, to folks, when you're testing in QA. And this is a thing. You might read this every once in a while about, when folks are testing in their non-production environments and they send out, thousands of emails to their customers or partners because they did have valid email addresses sitting in QA. So you want to try and avoid that, of course. We have two different algorithms for email. One would just be kind of plain email, and all this would do is generate random characters @ randomcharacters.com. If you want to get a little bit more advanced than that, there's another algorithm we have here. And in this one, it's what we call the advanced email. It's pretty straightforward. Then you'll put in the first name, which was available on that that same table. And maybe I'll just use the first character of it with a delimiter, and you have some options there, followed by the last name, and maybe our organization is limited to, let's say, first 10 characters of the last name, followed by a domain name. So again, this is all really pretty straightforward. The intent is just for you to be able to dive right into the product, read some help if need be, but then be up and running and ready, within minutes. And I can do the same thing, with the other tables that I included, like the address. Maybe I'll change the phone number around. Let's see, for a ticket, I did actually have them. There's also on the ticket table, we have a credit card again there, and this ID num, I went ahead and looked at the data, and it did look like Social Security number, so I'll go ahead and use our Social Security number algorithm for that as well. Okay, so far I've done a really pretty good job here. On the source, I've figured out which tables that I want to bring over. The target, I said, what I want to do as far as insert or updates. The subset, I did the filtering, so I don't want to bring over all the data, but just some of it. And then for masking, I've now included some out-of-the-box masking algorithms to ensure the sensitive data is not moved out of production. And the final step is really just to go ahead and run this or schedule. And as Julie had mentioned, everything I'm doing so far is design time. I'm not processing any data, and all of this is done in the Informatica cloud, not on-premise. But the actual agent right here, this is actually the Vibe component where it's sitting on my laptop, and so the actual processing will be done on-premise behind your firewall. So for this case, I'm going to go ahead and say to run this now. And we could do the monitoring here. So what's going on right now is that the definition of this task is being pushed down to the Vibe component that's sitting on my laptop, and that actually completed really pretty fast because it moves 26 rows of data from source to target for those two schemas that were sitting on my desktop. All right, so now let's go ahead and take a look at the target environment. Let me close this one here. So we now hopefully have some data here, and wonderful. So I did move over one customer ID, and let's do a quick look. So it's customer ID 597, and we have a select here from customer, and this is from the source environment. Execute this guy. So this was Towley. So that was the right person that we moved over the right customer. So back over to then customer on in my non-production environment. So we brought them over. In addition, then we see, okay, the last name has definitely changed. First name has changed. It's a little bit more difficult to look at the credit card. You'd have to compare source and target to make sure that that changed, but that was indeed changed, as well as the Social Security number and date of birth, because it is in the right range here. It's now in 1971. All right, let's also take a look then at the related data, because it's okay to move over, let's say one table at a time, but you have to ensure you keep the relationship so you have the integrity of the database as well as the application. So we brought over the correct address information for a Towley customer, so very good. And if there was sensitive data in here, we masked that as well. And then also what we did is bring over the tickets. So these are the airline tickets related to that customer. Oh, and I see here too that we need to do a little bit more work on the passenger name. So you can do some masking there as well. And then also for ticket attachments. So I brought those over. So the gist of it here is that what we'll do with building those relationships is that we'll ensure that we both navigate down the relationship chain and back up again to ensure that we bring over all of the related tables that are defined either physically in the database or what you defined logically within the task. And we move over then any of the sensitive data that we ensure that it's masked before it lands in the target environment. So one more quick look back to the application. So let me go back to the data masking application. So I went through this Oracle sample, but as we did talk earlier, Julie mentioned this on one of the slides, that this is also applicable for Salesforce as well. I won't actually execute this one, but it's the same process. You have source, target, subset masking, and then scheduling. So all you do here is if you have Salesforce, then you set up the relationships between the different objects. Same sort of thing on the target. I picked my target sandbox environment, put in my filter criteria. So in this case, I'll use, again, like a last name of the actual contact. On the masking side of things, there were two different objects called cases and contacts, and put in the exact same masking rules. So the main point here to make is that the same tool could be utilized for your on-premise Oracle databases, but also for SaaS applications that are hosted in the cloud, like Salesforce.com. So once you learn the tool, which again, won't take a whole heck of a lot of time, you can apply your knowledge and the tool to many different data sources. So that ends the demonstration for today. So thanks everybody for looking at the demonstration. Then we have a few more follow-on slides and questions.
Great. And, Jay, every time I watch this demonstration, it reminds me of back when I was a DBA, trying to figure out the right scripts to create and being able to see what you've done just through point and click. I mean, I can think of hours of time that I would have saved if I had this tool then. But, the cloud has really taken on, right? I mean, everyone is looking for cloud, but they're looking for cloud for applications. A lot of companies are spinning up test and development environments in the cloud, including Oracle in Amazon, right? I mean, so we're seeing people not creating, not building the servers, not creating the test environments on premises for an upgrade or a rollout or a new application or a new functionality rollout, but they're spinning it up in the cloud. They're doing the development and the testing. And they may have one or two environments on premises, but they're using this cloud, basically, the elastic development environment. And this is perfect for that, right? Because those environments could be on premises in the cloud. It doesn't really matter. So when we look at how we've packaged this technology together, we're really thinking about it that the landscape of testing is changing, and the developers need to have tools that can adapt to that change. So on the way that we package our products is the technology, as you saw in the Informatica Cloud application, is called Informatica Cloud Test Data Management. That's the name of the suite of applications. We mentioned it includes data masking and data subset. So if you were to go to the Informatica Cloud landing page and you went to the products, you would see under test data management, data masking. So what we provide from an additions perspective is cloud data masking. What that provides, we do offer a free or freemium version of this product, and what that allows you to do is mask only, no subset, up to 10,000 rows per day. So if you have a small project that you're just trying to spin up, or you have a use case where you have an environment that you want to mask the data in place. So this is another limitation of the free product, is if you have let's say an Oracle testing environment or a Salesforce.com testing environment, you can pick a few columns or rows or whatever, or a few objects with a few columns, mask them, but the limit is up to 10,000 per day. If you want to do more than 10,000 rows per day, then you need to license or subscribe to the Cloud Test Data Management Standard Edition, and that's where you get the unlimited usage. Now you'll notice also that there's which includes two connectors. So a connector in the Informatica Cloud vernacular means I'm going to connect to a source and I'm going to connect to a target. So as you saw in the demonstration with Jay, he had a source and a target. Now what a lot of our customers do is they'll have one source and many targets. So they want to copy those tasks, save as, or maybe modify it because they have a different testing criteria for different targets, test 1, test 2, QA, et cetera. They can use the same software, but it includes two connectors, but they would just have to license more connectors for the number of environments they want to connect to. And then, the Cloud Test Data Management Standard Edition also includes subset. It includes not only in place, but what Jay showed was in-stream masking. So as soon as you want to go from source to a different target, then you do need to subscribe to the Standard Edition. Now, again, there are a lot more capabilities that are available with our on-premises software. If you have a much more complicated environment that requires heterogeneous platform support, like, for example, in a fully integrated test suite environment, you might have an Oracle environment, a Salesforce environment, you might have a legacy system on premises, you might have a data warehouse, and you want to have a test data set that spans across all those, where you can have multiple workflows and have a complete data set that works across that integrated test case. Then what you probably will want to start to take a look at is a combination of the Cloud Test Data Management Standard Edition software and our on-premises software, which is what we package as our Test Data Management Enterprise Edition. So what I'd like to do, and if you want to have more information that you want to look for this, if you go to the Informatica Cloud website, there's a menu item that says Additions and Pricing. You go to the Additions, and there'll be a tab specifically for Cloud Test Data Management. And at the bottom of that page, there's a link for the data sheet, and it gives you a lot more detail on that. So everything, any follow-up questions on pricing or packaging or what's available in the different editions is all available on Informatica Cloud's website. So why don't we open up our last poll. And so, operator, if you wouldn't mind posting. So we've talked a lot about Cloud Test Data Management. So the question out to our audience is, what are your plans to try a cloud-based test data management solution? So we'll keep the poll open, but is it something that you want to look at in the next 3 months, next 6 months, next year? Maybe you don't have any plans and you're just exploring your options. Let us know. I mean, it's good to make sure that we're providing these types of educational webinars for the people that, the timing is always right, okay? So if you would go ahead and take a few minutes and select what your plans are. We'll go to the next slide. So what's the call to action here? I mentioned that we have the free data masking edition. So on the bottom of that slide, you'll see a link there, informaticacloud.com/products/data-masking. That'll take you to the data masking specific page, and there's a button on there that says, try it now. If you want to see or share today's demonstration, we have posted a version of this demo specifically for the Salesforce.com example that Jay alluded to, available on YouTube, but also on our website. If you go again to that same landing page, informaticacloud.com/product/test-data-management, there is a window right in the middle of the web page. You can click on that, and you'll hear Jay provide the Salesforce.com example demonstration. Now, we do offer a a trial. We do offer a 1-month trial, but if you mention this webinar and you're very interested in the Oracle version, we will contact us today. Respond to, if you go online again, there's a button that says contact us today. Send a note and say we're very much interested in trying the software out. We have a project that we want to use this on and get experience with it to see if this is something that you would be interested in on a more longer-term basis. So lots of options for you. What I'd like to do now, Jay, is if you notice in the Q&A panel if there are any questions that we might want to answer, we'll move into the Q&A portion for the last 10 minutes of our webinar.
All right, very good. Yes, so there has been a few questions that have come in.
Great.
All right, so I see one of them here is, what is the difference, more about terms, I guess. Well, what's the difference between connector and connection?
Connector and connection. Oh, yeah, that's a good question because on the Enterprise Edition, we said you get 2 connectors but unlimited connections. So with the difference there is when you use the cloud subscription product or the service, a connector gives you the ability to connect to like an Oracle instance. If you have 2 Oracle environments, then you need 2 connectors, right? Source and target. Those are 2 separate connectors. When you license the on-premises software, what we provide is you license that connection, but you license the adapter type. So basically you have an Oracle adapter or you have a SQL Server adapter, and you can connect to as many on-premises test environments with that license. So the terms and conditions are a little bit different between a connector and a connection. Connector is specifically to the cloud product, and connection is specifically a term related to the on-premises relational adapter that is probably outside the scope of this particular webinar conversation, but it's a good point, good question.
Thanks, Julie. Yes, another question came in. I can take this one. Is the data masking algorithm customizable? So yes, as we showed in the demonstration, there are a couple of different, we have a handful of data masking algorithms that are delivered out of the box, and each release we will add more. What's very nice about the whole cloud and hosted environment is that what we do is that the release cycles are relatively pretty quick, and the whole intent is that we have a set of end users or customers that are out there, and we want to respond to their needs and requirements very quickly. So the releases are actually, the cadences almost every quarter, and the next release is actually coming out in the early part of November. So every release will add more standard masking rules, and for each of those rules that are appropriate for configuration, you'll have a configuration option. And then also in upcoming releases as well, we will add the ability for users to be able to create their own masking algorithm. In addition, another feature that's actually available on some of the other applications that I showed earlier, like data synchronization and others, is that one can create what is called a maplet. So you can use, if you already have let's say the Enterprise Edition Test Data Management, you can create a maplet on premise and then upload that into the data masking task. That's a future, but just right around the corner. So lots of options, some available today and some just around the corner.
And you bring up a good point, Jay, right? Because that's kind of the cool thing about cloud, right? You subscribe to the service, so whenever new features become available, it's available for use, right? I mean, if it's part of the license agreement or the package that you subscribe to. And I guess if you think about Informatica strategy as a whole, we really are embracing hybrid IT and developing and rolling out our products to support that model. And a lot of our existing on-premises test data management customers are moving to the cloud. So like you said, they've developed and built these maplets for custom masking algorithms. They want to be able to use those in the cloud. And what you're describing is exactly the strategy for Informatica, right? You should be able to adapt your testing cycles on premises in the cloud just as you should be able to adapt how you consume the technology. So that's a great question, and I love to hear that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like you mentioned. As far as hybrid IT, utilizing both cloud and on-premise software, and we work with our own Informatica IT, as well as talk to other IT shops out there, and that is definitely the approach that is moving forward today. Is that if there's some cloud software that's available that'll do the same task as on-premise, then a lot of IT organizations are looking at that because there's no footprint that's on-premise, and it's as far as the upgrades, like you mentioned, they're just pretty much automatic. You don't have to apply an upgrade. It's just automatically put on to the cloud environment.
Well, my favorite part, Jay, is that we can create a test data subset in the amount of time it takes for me to write an email to purchasing to issue a PO and get the whole invoicing system set up, right? So, I mean, you're much more agile and you can get things done, and it really, lifts the burden of all of, that used to be the standard operating procedure of, setting up a server, installing the operating system, installing the software, and then 2 weeks later you might be able to create a test data subset. So it looks like we're out of questions. What I'd like to do is thank everyone here. We're going to wrap up this and give everyone 5 minutes back to their time. I'd like to thank everyone, especially Jay. Thank you so much for going through the product with us in the demonstration. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We really appreciate you spending the time with us to learn about how to take your test data management practices to the cloud. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to the operator to wrap up the call.
Thank you again for joining us today. This concludes today's web conference. You may now disconnect. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.